It's the e-commerce master plan podcast. Here to help you solve your marketing problems and grow your e-commerce business. Cutting through the hype to bring you inspiration and advice from the e-commerce sector and beyond. Here's your host, Chloe Thomas.
Hello and welcome to another episode from the e-commerce master plan podcast. I'm Chloe Thomas, and as it always is, it continues to amaze me how many of you tune in week after week, and I'm so pleased to be helping you to grow your businesses. In today's episode, we're not going to talk about traffic. We almost always talk about traffic. Well, we're not going to be talking about traffic. We're going to be exploring some of the lessons from our guest's decade of creating seven-figure e-commerce businesses. He's going to be telling us what the central thread that worked in all his businesses to create great growth, fast growth has been. And that's mainly focused around the world of story. So we're going to be learning about stories. If you struggle to work out what should be in your welcome campaign, if you struggle to work out what should be on your About Us page, if you struggle to unveil the humanity of your business to get that emotional connection with your customers, then you really need to listen to this episode. And make sure you listen right to the very end to find out about his latest venture, which is really fascinating and could be a great opportunity to help you on your e-commerce journey. Before we get into all that, though, please do check out our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Klaviyo, the most recommended growth marketing platform on the market. Klaviyo helps more than 28,000 e-commerce brands globally to grow their businesses through high-value customer relationships. From a shopper's first impression to each subsequent purchase, Klaviyo understands every interaction, empowering brands to create more personalized marketing moments. When you have a 360-degree view of the customer, the growth possibilities are endless. And the results speak for themselves. Klaviyo customers have made more than £2.8 billion in revenue through Klaviyo in the last year alone. Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan. That's KLAVIYO.com/masterplan. Are you wasting time updating product quantities each time you sell something? What about sending new customer orders for fulfillment? Imagine taking all that time and putting it to better use. That's what Ecom Dash promises to help you do. This e-commerce software will be your 24/7 salesperson, updating 20 plus platforms like Amazon and eBay with accurate product details and sending customer orders to your fulfillment choice without you lifting a finger. Get time back to focus on growing your business. Try it free at ecomdash.com/masterplan and use promo code masterplan to get 50% off your first 2 months. That's ecomdash.com/masterplan. And now to introduce today's special guest. JJ Resnick is the founder of multiple seven-figure brands, including the Moscow Copper Company, the creators of the famous Moscow Mule cocktail. JJ's joining us to talk about some of the brands he's built and how story has been central to success in each case. Hello, JJ.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. And story is something which I know a lot of people struggle with. So I'm really looking forward to finding out how you've utilised it and some things which maybe might help our listeners to do it a bit better in the future. But before we get into all of that, how did you yourself get started in e-commerce all those years ago?
You know, it was actually a bit of a fluke that got me into e-commerce. But it was right around 2010. I actually was planning on being a professional golfer, making a living that way. But knee injury happened and a couple other things. Primarily, the injury put me out of business there. And I realized that I needed to go find a job or work for a living. But I've been an entrepreneur. You know, my mindset has just been entrepreneurial focused since I was really second or third grade, selling sunglasses to my fellow students and hiding all my money in my pillowcase under the bed. So, you know, I realized that I had to do something. And it was one evening I was at a party and my best friend from high school had just come back from Afghanistan. His Humvee was hit by an IED and he was injured pretty badly. So he had a service dog at this point, and we're sitting in the corner at this party just talking for hours, catching up, and I'm learning all about service dogs, and he's sharing the struggles that he's been having with his service dog, and that blew me away, because here's somebody who gave his life, fought for our country, and comes back injured, and he's now having a more difficult time getting through just daily life activities than he was having before. And
I'm guessing that the problems with the service dog weren't the dog as the problem. They might have been something else as the problem, maybe other people.
Other people, exactly. But it still involved the dog, because let's say he'd go into a Starbucks. He would be kicked out, he told me, 50-60% of the time.
No way.
Yeah, it was really, it came down to the employees not being properly trained on what a service animal was. And people just had the belief that a service dog was to help the blind, seeing eye dog. So if it wasn't a blind person, they figured it wasn't a service dog. And it's so far from the truth, which I have learned and become an expert on over the years. But long story short, I decided I was going to help him with that and create all sorts of service dog products for him and other veterans and disabled Americans. So service dog leashes, harnesses, identification cards. None of these things were required by law, but it's a catch-22, because you don't need it by law, but if the employees at Starbucks, the worst was when he tried to go home and American Airlines kicked him off the flight, wouldn't let him on. He was trying to visit his family, and that was the final straw for me. I said, I need to do something here to help you out. And so we launched Service Dog Registration of America, created, we were the pioneer in that space. And that's what got me into e-commerce to begin with. That business lasted a few years. I ended up selling it when my passion it wasn't there any longer, because I started seeing people like Paris Hilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger's kids coming through and purchasing products from us when they really didn't have a service
dog.
Yeah. But again, there's the double-edged sword, because you're trying to help and provide people that genuinely need the service and these products, but anybody can take advantage of them. So at that point, I knew that the business was incredible. I mean, I started this just as a side project, hobby, to help him, and it ended up doing over $10,000 in its first month.
Wow.
When I had nothing, I had no experience in e-commerce whatsoever.
That's crazy.
And within the first 12 months, we were already over six figures a month. By the time I sold the business, we were close to $300,000 a month in sales. So
wow.
It just so happened. Funny little side note or story on what brought me into my next business. Sorry if I'm jumping ahead.
No, fire away. This is fascinating.
But I was overseas. I was actually at the Canton Fair in China, and I had brought my father along with me. He had always wanted to go see Hong Kong and go throughout Asia, so I took him on a trip. And we're walking back to the hotel after a really long day at the fair, looking at every dog product you could imagine. And we cut through this kitchen expo to get back to the Westin Hotel. Well, the kitchen expo, just about every booth in this place had copper mugs. And I say copper mugs, they were really tin, some of them plastic with a copper spray paint on top. But I look at my dad and I said, "This is incredible. None of these mugs look anything like Grandma Sophie's." And for those of you who don't know me, um, I should step back for a sec. My great grandmother invented the cocktail called the Moscow Mule in 1941, and she was the one who brought the copper mug to the party. And her two friends, one of them had just purchased Smirnoff vodka, and the other had the Cock and Bull pub in Hollywood, California, and he was brewing his own ginger beer. So the three of them, out of marketing necessity, needing to sell their wares, created this cocktail, and the Moscow Mule was born. But going back to being in China with my dad, I'm seeing all these mugs, but they look nothing like the mug my great grandmother created.
Mm-hmm.
So I go and pick them up. I'm feeling them. They weigh about 10% of what are. So
Yeah.
I had inherited this mug, which was the very first mug ever used to create a Moscow Mule. And it had just been a fun story that was, in our family history for years. But at the time, the Moscow Mule wasn't popular. It had gone away in the Cold War and just disappeared for decades. And so it was just starting to come back around the Mad Men era, 2009, 2010. And so I decide this is a perfect segue, perfect fit for me to get out of the dog business and into my family business. So I relaunch the Moscow Copper Company, and takes me about a year to go and source the very best copper in the world, which came from India. It was either Mexico, India, or Turkey, and Mexico was too dangerous at the time to go down. Turkey, so it came to Turkey and India, and the factory in India just did a much better job producing the mugs. So, it was definitely some trial and error there for about a year because I had no experience at this time. I had some e-commerce experience, of course, with my dog business, but nothing when it came to copper mugs. So
yeah, that's a whole other ball game, isn't it? It's like got to find the raw materials, find the manufacturer. Yeah,
right.
A whole other world.
But I knew at the time how important story was, because I had the story built into the previous business, with my best friend coming back from Afghanistan and trying to help him, and then that leading into helping tons of disabled Americans and vets, and getting letters from these veterans where they were brought to tears because they were finally able to get on an airplane and not be hassled to go visit family or just to get through their daily lives. And that it felt incredible being able to help so many people. But like I said, when it got to that point where too many people were taking advantage of the service, that's when it was time for me to get out.
And what I find quite interesting is the story with the service dogs business is almost the more normal type of story we hear about. It's we're going to use a story to illustrate the pain point so people feel like they're connected to it and then they're going to buy. Whereas the story with the Moscow Mule is a completely different scenario where there's not a pain point. No one's out there, with feeling pain in their lives because they can't get the right mug for their Moscow Mule. But by using a story in a very different way, you created another really strong business from story. So, do you think the story was really the solid thing at the heart of each of those businesses, without which you wouldn't have grown them to the size they reached?
Exactly. Because with the Moscow Copper Company, it's a commodity, right? It's a copper mug's a copper mug's a copper mug.
Mm-hmm.
But with our story built in, it's not just a copper mug anymore. Now you're talking about the original. You're bringing authenticity into the story. So instead of just drinking your Moscow Mule out of any old plastic tin mug, you're now able to drink from the original vessel that this cocktail was created in nearly 100 years ago. So that's so powerful, the emotions that are brought into that story with my great grandmother creating it. And now, do you want to just drink from this plastic piece of garbage, or do you want to drink from the proper copper vessel that the drink was intended to be consumed in? Now you get into the science of why copper is so important, because of the chemical reaction that takes place when the lime and the ginger beer and the vodka all come together to create that extra carbonation and the flavor of everything coming together in that copper mug. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. And it's that the only way you're really going to get that across to someone is as part of the story, isn't it? And it strikes me that you've had two businesses where this story is an intrinsic part of the business, and then the emotional side is so important too, because we hear a lot these days about you must use emotion in your selling, you must use emotion in your selling. And I think a lot of e-commerce people come to e-commerce loving the ones and the zeros. They like the reliability of Facebook ads or Google ads and how you can optimize based on performance. And therefore for them, bringing that emotion in, bringing that story in is quite challenging. So if you got some advice, JJ, for those who, as you've looked at story a lot and how it relates to e-commerce success, for those who are struggling a bit, have you got some advice for them on how they might want to put story into their business?
Oh, I sure do. So, Chloe, I've learned a lot in all my years of building successful brands, but the single most important thing I've learned is that building relationships is what grows revenue. And storytelling is the most powerful technique there is for building relationships. So there's science behind the power of storytelling too. Our brains process not only stories, but the human emotions behind them, as you were just mentioning. And they lead to better understanding, trust, comprehension, receptivity, and more. So think about it for a second. We teach important ideas to our children through fables and fairy tales, right? Mm-hmm. We learn about important religious and historical figures through dialogue and story. We connect, engage, we're moved to tears, to laughter, to anger, to sympathy, to action. But understanding others' thoughts and feelings, we're able to empathize now, and this creates real emotional connections that can turn into trust and eventually into revenue. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's absolutely crucial to learn how to build a brand story, and one that's unique to you and your company. So it really doesn't matter where in the world you're based or how much funding your startup has. Good stories can give small ventures a big voice. And this is precisely how I've been able to take every brand that I've launched to 7 figures and beyond within the first 12 months. And that being said, one of the most critical aspects to brand storytelling, and something that so many entrepreneurs get wrong, is understanding that your story is not actually about your company. Your story needs to be centered around your customer and the value that they receive when engaging with your product or service. So, as long as you always remember that your customer is the hero in your story, you're just really the guide. If you can remember that, you'll always have a leg up on your competition. And think about the storyline in a movie. it's broken down into three parts, right? A problem, a solution to that problem, and success. Well, your product or your brand is the solution or the guide that takes your customer from problem to achieving success. And this is why it's mission critical that a new brand takes the time up front to fully develop their approaches to storytelling. And because I've seen so many people struggle with this, so many friends have come to me with, wanting to start a brand, but they have no idea about story or how to bring story into that. So I've decided to make it my mission to help other entrepreneurs and to help them tell their stories through their brand. Am I going on too long?
Or? No. This is great. And it's kind of one of those ones where you're like, okay, I get it. Problem to success, focus it on the customer and not on me. But it's still quite hard to do, isn't it? I think it's one of these, story is one of those things which it's a lot easier to do on someone else than it is to do it on yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, so when you're beginning your brand story, I'll give you a couple tips. I mean, you always want to start with the why behind what you do. For example, let's take Tom's, the shoe company. So their why was to improve lives, right? How about Burt's Bees? Are you familiar with them?
Yeah. They're like lip salve and things.
Yeah. Well, now they've got close to 400 products.
Oh, wow.
But their why was simply to create earth-friendly, all-natural products. So, I even have my 18-month-old son has Burt's Bees clothing. They went from a lip balm into baby clothing. So
wow.
It's pretty incredible. But understanding that why can be difficult, like you said. And especially if you started your business purely to capture an opportunity to make money. So, here are some questions for your audience to help figure out their why. And the first is, why do we exist? Right? Second is, how do we contribute to the world? Third, what is our mission? And finally, what motivated me to start my business? If you can answer those questions and think about the story around why your brand exists in the first place, just take a step back and look for the purpose of your brand beyond the products that you create. That's so critical. And rather than discussing theory, let's take another real life example. Here's one that came up just the other day for me. A friend of mine, he's working on creating a brand that sells all natural pain reliever. So it's a product to compete with brands like Advil. And he came to me for advice because he was having a difficult time coming up with his brand story. But some ideas came to me immediately. And what's ironic about his story is that my friend was actually the one who told me the story, but he didn't even realize it as he was telling it to me. So I asked him, what's the reason you created the product? And he said, well, it all came from the mornings that I would wake up hungover, and he hated taking Advil because he's always hearing about how bad it is on your stomach and your internal organs. And he's always been one of those natural type products kind of guys. But he could never find a product that would relieve his headache the way that an Advil would. He didn't realize it at the time, but he's giving me his brand story right then and there. Right? It doesn't get much better than that. So
it's clear as day, isn't it? When someone points it out to you, he's like, oh my God, that's so obvious.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just keep in mind, your story doesn't have to be groundbreaking. Oftentimes the most compelling brand stories are simply the ones where somebody couldn't find what they were looking for, so they decided to go out and make it themselves, just like my friend did. That's a brand story right there.
So, JJ, when you explain it with that example, it seems just so clear and obvious how we should go about doing this. So, have you got, you've done this a lot. So, have you got kind of some top tips, I guess, for the guests for the listeners, even not the guest, you're the guest, for the listeners on how to go about identifying that story in their business?
I have. I've actually created a checklist, and I use this checklist whenever I'm creating a new brand, and I give it to all my partners who are working on developing story in their brands. So I'll walk you through it right now, and your listeners. Number one, your story should be simple, and it should be conceptually straightforward. Okay, number two, your story should involve a problem, a solution, and success, as I've mentioned before. Number three, your story must connect with your customer. Number four, your customers should buy a piece of the story and not just a product from you. This is really important. So, for example, Patagonia, they use the term worn wear to describe their clothing products that have endured for years, right? The products themselves, the items that the customers buy, are part of the brand story. They call this the stories we wear. And it's become such a big deal for Patagonia's branding that they've even made a movie about it. But most importantly, once you have your brand story, you need to begin sharing that story. And you can do that by telling everybody you talk to. You can share it on social media, of course, through your brand's website. But the truth is, a great story will be shared naturally by all of your customers, right? Customers love to buy into a great brand story. And the reason they often buy is because it now gives them the permission to tell your story. That's one of my favorite lines just to keep in my mind. So just think, you want to give your customer the permission to tell your story. I can't tell you how many of our customers at Moscow Copper have called in or wrote on social media saying, I just absolutely love your product. I'm so glad I found it. I was able to share it and buy it for all my family members and friends, because now let's use Tom's again for an example. When everybody was talking about how great this new shoe company was, you didn't hear anybody talking about the quality of their shoes or the actual product they were selling. No, what you heard people talking about was how great this company Tom's was, because they would donate a pair of shoes to somebody in need for every pair that they sold, right? People wanted to share that story because of how it made them feel. And now they wanted to wear Tom's because it sent a message about who they were as a person, who they are as a person. If you're wearing Tom's shoes, you're somebody who cares about making the world a better place, right? And helping those in need. And that's a powerful message that you can send, because people buy things, we know, for two reasons: to get closer to pleasure or to get away from pain.
E-commerce Master Plan is supported by some of the greatest companies in the e-commerce sector. Here's a reminder of who they are.
How are the leading D2C brands growing their business? They're using Klaviyo, the growth marketing platform chosen by over 28,000 global innovative online brands. Klaviyo believes in supporting growth, which is why they won't tie you into lengthy contracts, hidden setup or support fees, or feature-based pricing. With a platform that is both powerful and easy to use, it's no surprise so many brands have switched to Klaviyo. Looking for one more compelling reason? Brands switching to Klaviyo see an average of 62 times ROI on their investment. Ready to learn more? Visit klaviyo.com/masterplan. That's KLAVIYO.com/masterplan. Are you interested in selling products on more platforms like Amazon, Google Shopping, and eBay? Then you should check out Ecom Dash, multi-channel inventory and order management software. They help online sellers like you sell products in more places with less hassle. With more than 20 integrations, Ecom Dash will automatically update inventory levels, shipping info, and more everywhere you sell. Retailers call them their 24/7 salesperson. See what the fuss is all about. Try it free at ecom-com/masterplan and use promo code masterplan to get 50% off your first 2 months. That's ecomdash.com/masterplan.
It's time for the top tips round.
Okay, I love this section because it gives me and our listeners some really quick ideas for taking our businesses to the next level. So, JJ, the first is the book top tip. If everyone listening to this podcast agreed to take Friday off and read a book to make their business better, which book would you recommend?
It's such a tough question. I'm a reader, although these days I'm more into Audible because it allows me to listen to a lot more books. But if I had to choose just one to give the audience, I'd have to go with Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And are you familiar with Persuasion?
I love his work. Cialdini is just so clever.
Yeah, I mean, Persuasion, it kind of ties into what we've been talking about today. Mm-hmm. With emotions and why people buy. But, the book really shares, it's the ability that marketers have to influence your mood for their own benefit. And that's what's known as persuasion. So I highly recommend the book. It'll teach you how to sell a product or an idea successfully, why you should question the importance of sensationalist news, and how your choice of words influence the behavior of those around you. So that's my book of choice for today.
Excellent. Okay, the traffic top tip. Which marketing method do you either prize above all others or think doesn't get the press it deserves?
I've driven traffic over the years through just about every medium that exists, but I can tell you without a doubt, the most profitable traffic for me has come from a Food and Wine magazine article that was titled Top 5 Things You Didn't Know About the Moscow Mule. This one article has generated over $500,000 in product sales over the past 5 years and continues to do so every day for me. The best part about this traffic is that I didn't pay a dime for it. So here's my recommendation on that. I say, whatever your niche is, find the leading publication for that niche and do whatever it takes to get them to write an editorial piece on your brand. So, even if you have to pay for it, do it, because that article will live on forever and it's worth every penny. But the key is make sure that it reads like a true editorial and not like an ad or an advertorial. I'm sure there's a million traffic tips or different traffic platforms you can go for, but that's my suggestion. My recommendation is get a great editorial piece on your brand out there, and it'll live on forever and generate you a lot of revenue.
Excellent. Okay, the tool top tip. Maybe a collaboration tool, a social media plugin, a phone app, or just a way of working. Is there a cool little tool you use that makes you and your team more efficient from day to day?
I'm going to switch this up a bit on you. And I mentioned I love reading, but I never have enough time to read all the books that I hear about. And I recently came across this app called Blinkist. Have you heard of Blinkist?
Yes, we had someone recommend it a couple of months ago on the show. Yeah, hugely cool show. Oh, no, please though, because I know some of the listeners will have missed it, and it's an awesome app.
Yeah, I love it because it allows me to get all the key main points of a book in a 15-minute Audible version, so I can listen to it on the go in the car. then if I'm still interested in learning more after that 15-minute version, then I'll buy the book. But that, to me, that's my favorite new app. I
Nice. I
highly
like it.
recommend it.
Time saving and education all in one. Okay, the growth top tip. If you met someone today who's focused on growing their e-commerce business from 100 orders per month to 1,000, what would be your number one tip for them?
My number one piece of advice would be to eliminate distraction. Eliminate distraction of all the shiny objects out there that are promising overnight results. And I know it's so easy to get distracted by all that stuff, but you've got to eliminate it and just pick your favorite platform, whether that's YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever it is, and focus on creating quality content and creating a lot of it. You're not going to see overnight results, but I can promise you that you'll be rewarded before you know it, and your compounding efforts are going to pay off in the long run. So create. I can't emphasize that enough. And simplify it just down to one platform, and you'll be successful.
Brilliant. JJ, you've given us so much cool advice today. It's been really awesome working through it all with you, and I know the listeners are just going to love it. But you are currently up to something rather exciting this year with your new venture, and I think it's going to be of interest to quite a lot of our listeners. So could you please tell us a little bit about what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, I'm so excited about my newest venture because here's the thing. I recently sold a majority stake in Moscow Copper so that I could go and help other entrepreneurs create their product and tell their story. I had so many friends and family members and just people reaching out to me wanting tips and advice on how to start a business. And I realized I want to build an empire myself with dozens of e-commerce brands, but I can only do this if I'm able to essentially clone myself. I can't be out there running all these companies. So that leads us into my newest venture, buildmybrand.xyz. And we're doing something completely revolutionary here that I've never seen done online or anywhere before. It's a mixture of an incubator, like a Shark Tank, and a consulting firm. But what we're going to do is we're actually partnering with new entrepreneurs who either have an idea for a product or even don't have an idea, because we've got some ideas ourselves that we can plug in. But the point is, we're looking for partners that we can plug into these businesses, teach our systems to, and be there by your side to help you grow and scale an e-commerce business yourself. Now, you're going to be the majority owner of this company. We're going to have a minority stake, but we're going to be your partner. And that's the reason so many businesses fail. It's because they don't have that partner by their side, and they run into a problem, they get stuck, and they quit. So we're eliminating that, and we'll be investing in these brands, and we'll, like I said, we'll be there right by your side, holding your hand to ensure that your business is successful, because we're not going to let it fail with our money into it. My money, my team, we're all going to be there to help you.
That's kind of crazy, JJ. So you're saying that if the listener's got a great idea or just passion and don't yet have the idea, if they get in touch with you and get accepted, then they get you as a business partner and your team's infrastructure just to help accelerate their business in the same way you've accelerated your own. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. Yep. And, some people may wonder, why would I, go and do this? Well, there's definitely a selfish reason in it for me. And it's because, like I said, I want to build an empire of e-commerce brands. And I can only do that with the help of others, with partners. So, it makes perfect sense for me to invest my time and my money into other entrepreneurs that are passionate enough and have the drive. I need partners who are willing to realize they don't know everything. We don't need know-it-alls. People who want to step back and learn that they might not know everything, but they're willing to follow a proven blueprint for success. That's it. As simple as that. If you're willing to follow that proven blueprint, we're here to help you, and let's do this together. Let's build, a successful brand together.
Cool. And JJ, someone who's listening who wants to find out more, who wants to apply and get involved, how do they get involved?
They go to buildmybrand.xyz/masterplan.
There you go, guys. Simple as that. buildmybrand.xyz/masterplan. JJ, I'm sure you're going to get some very interesting responses, some very interesting ideas landing on your desk. And I'm slightly jealous I don't get to help you pick through it all, because I think it's going to be a fascinating process.
Oh, hey, I may be calling you for some help on that. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get all those interesting requests, and I'm excited to work with your audience and hopefully develop some great long-term partnerships.
Yeah, hopefully in 6-12 months' time, we might be having some of them come back on the show to talk about how they've, turned into successes. It's going to be
will be.
Cool.
We'll be doing that.
Well, look, JJ, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, both for sharing your fascinating project with us, which I'm so interested to see how it all goes, and also for kind of lifting the lid on one of the most challenging parts of e-commerce, which is working out that brand story. So it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and keep up the great work over there. I love what you're doing.
So there you have it, guys. If you've got a great idea, or you're very early stage, or maybe you're just trying to get into e-commerce, then head to buildmybrand.xyz/masterplan to find out a bit more about JJ's opportunity and how to get involved. And how cool was that advice on story? Not only have you got that checklist, you've also got some great examples of both how you can use story in kind of a pain scenario with a pain product, a product that really solves a problem, in the case of the service dogs example. But you've also got a completely frivolous example with the Moscow Mule mugs. Nobody fundamentally needs a copper mug in their lives, but JJ's been able to use story in that business to build such a powerful performance too. So you can get all the notes from this quite long show today, including the top tips, links. These are related episodes and everything else, and that checklist. Just head over to ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast. And you will find a link to this show, and there you can find all the information and everything we've been talking about. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, then please do give us some feedback via their review app. I hope you have a great week and keep optimizing.
Thank you for listening to the E-Commerce Masterplan podcast. Find out more at ecommercemasterplan.com/podcast.